In the former episode, we will talk about the Middle Eastern philosophy, particularly representing all the Mediterranean areas. And they are different. The ancient Hellenic philosophy in Greece, the Byzantine era, there are schools of philosophical thoughts, etc. And the Mediterranean schools of thoughts, particularly representing all the Semitic regions, Babylonia, Assyria, Accadia, Sumeria, etc. etc. These are the Mediterranean philosophy around these areas, or the so-called Middle Eastern philosophy. And we continue to talk about from the inception as the Egyptian philosophy. And we did talk about several ancient historical periods in Egypt. They are different. From the inception, it is the pre-dynastic period before 3150 BC. Then the early dynastic period, representing an historical era of 3150 BC toward 2686 BC, 286 BC. Then, after this early dynastic period, there occurred to emerge old kingdom, or the so-called monarchs, Egyptian monarchs, called as pharaohs, the domain, the old kingdom, 2686 BC to 2181 BC. Then there is a historically important era of the invasions, the so-called revolts or the civil wars. The first intermediate period, 2181 BC to 2055 BC. And thereafter the first intermediate period, again the pharaohs became so powerful, and the period of Middle Kingdom arose in between 2124 BC to 1690 BC. Then there is a stalemate, and there occurred several invasions, civil wars, and the second intermediate period from 1674 BC to 1514 BC. Then again, the pharaoh's domination, as new kingdom, 1514 BC to 1069 BC. Then again, a conflict and the decay of the pharaoh's domineering power. And the third intermediate period, 1016 BC toward 653 BC. Then later period, 653 BC toward 333 BC. Thereafter the pharaoh's domination vanishes. Then again, the Greek invasion by Alexander and his military leader, the so-called commander, powerful commander of Alexander the Great. After Alexander the Great's premature death, he ruled over Egypt. He took over Egypt as a province, and he continued his domination across Egypt. And he created a new era in history by the Ptolemaic period, 333 BC toward 30 BC. So during this period, we can understand that the Queen Cleopatra, and Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and Octavius Caesar, all of these characters. This is all occurred during the Ptolemaic period, 332 BC to 30 BC. Then after the defending war against Octavius Caesar's aggression, or the Augustus Caesar's aggression against Cleopatra, Mark Antony committed suicide. Cleopatra also committed suicide by using a snake and getting bitten by a snake the snake venom, the snake bite, after killed. And then the Romans take over Egypt, and it became a Roman province for a long period, prolonged period. 302 AD toward AD, 302, 332, uh, 300 BC toward 641 AD, Christian era. BCE toward 30 BCE toward AD 641. 641 CE. Then after 641, the Roman domination across Egypt vanishes. The Islam control all the Semitic regions, Mesopotamian regions, and invades all other territories adjacent to the Mediterranean era, Mediterranean territories. And they also conquer, after invasion they conquer Egypt under the Islamic rule by Islam, Rashidun Caliphate, since 639 to 641 AD. Then Egypt absolutely is under the control of the Islam Caliphate. These are the ancient histories of the Egypt. Then we are destined to talk about, or not destined, but we are very responsible to talk about the ancient Egyptian philosophy. When we go on to continue or talk about the Egyptian philosophy, we have to look back into the ancient religion as well. So we have to first talk about ancient Egyptian religion. Which are the ancient religions? We are not aware of it. So it is very important to talk about Egyptian religions. So the ancient Egyptians believed in the divinity and a divine God or divine gods, and in their life, the people's life, their consequent life course and death, and rebirth after life in ancient civilization from its inception itself. Pharaonic rule was based on the divine rights of kings, or the pharaohs, the monarchs. The Egyptian pantheons was populated by gods. All these Egyptian pantheons belong to religious perceptions, were populated by gods who had immense supernatural powers. And the royal lineage in Egypt were used to call on these gods for protection and help whenever they face crisis in their administration or during their domain in ancient times in Egypt. Therefore, all the Egyptian gods were not the so-called pseudo-gods. There have been so powerful gods with vengeance, with certain omnipotent characters, so wrathful. So these gods are very wrathful. So the Egyptian pantheons, or the so-called Egyptians, ancient Egyptians, however, were afraid of these gods, their wraths, divine wraths of the gods. And these Egyptian people began to worship gods for their benevolence. They want protection, they want benevolence to get protected from these wrathful gods. Because these gods have the supernatural powers. And particularly the royal lineage, or the monarchs and their families, went on to appease these gods to protect them by sacrifices, offerings, prayers, and weird rituals. The ancient structure of these religious pantheon was changed continuously and drastically as new deities were promoted by different hierarchies. The ancient pharaoh hierarchies always changed from time to time, and thereby the ancient structure of this religious pantheon was changed continuously and drastically. And new deities emerged to get worshipped, and they were promoted on the on the highest rung to get worshipped. How the priests were so lazy and made no effort to organize these diverse and sometimes conflicting myths and legends into a coherent system. This changing monarchical rule didn't affect them. The priests, the holy priests, made this somewhat weird. And thereby these various conceptions of divinity were not considered contradictory, but rather layers in the multiple facets of reality. And all these gods got prominence whenever the dynasty changes. The priests, the holy priests, at the behest of the monarchs or the pharaohs, worshipped gods in the cult temples. These cult temples were built at the behest of pharaohs, and the holy priests worshipped these gods in the sanctum. And these holy gods were consecrated in the center of the sanctum. A cult statue was the representation placed in the center of the sanctum. And these temples were neither place of public worship nor congregation. These temples were built at the behest of the pharaohs and were not allowed for the common people to enter and to worship. The priests at the behest of monarchs worshipped gods in the cult temples. The gods were secretly worshipped. These temples were neither the places of public worship nor congregation, but entirely for the visit of royal monarchs and the important persons belong to the royal lineage. However, on selected feast days and celebrations in the country, the shrine carrying the statue of God was brought out from the temple and allowed the public to worship and seek blessings and to worship and seek blessings from these gods, which were brought out from the sanctum of the temple. And these public worshipped these gods, sought blessings, and also they prayed with adulation to the monarch pharaohs who ruled them. And therefore, the ancient Egyptian deities were the gods and goddesses representing different natural forces and phenomena. The ancient Egyptians appeased them by sacrifices, offerings, and weird rituals. The ancient Egyptian state, controlled by the monarchs or the so-called pharaohs, around 3100 BC, had the authority to perform these tasks of religious rituals by their appointed holy priests. In different eras, various gods were said to hold the highest position in devout society in the country. One of the important gods in ancient Egypt was the solar deity Ra. Ra had the prominence, who was the sun god. And the mysterious god Amun. Amun was also an incarnation of Ra, the sun god. Therefore, he was also called Amun Ra. And the other important goddess was Isis, the mother goddess Isis, who had also great importance at the time. During the 14th century BC, the official Egyptian religion focused on to worship exclusively on the solar deity Aten, or Aten Ra. Aten was a great deity and was also called Aten Ra. The prominent gods worshipped during the time of the Ptolemy dynasty as well, Aten Ra. And during this time, other insignificant deities were Shu, Tefnut, Geb, Nut, Osiris, Jet, Isis, Nephathis, etc. The other insignificant deities were Sia, Hu, Heka, and the god of the dead, Osiris. And these were the ancient religious situation. During all these historical periods or stages of history. During the time of the pharaohs, they built several sun temples, pyramids, Giza pyramids, including these Giza pyramids, several pyramids of tombs for royal monarchy, that people of the royal dynasty, and obelisks. Obelisks were also built. Obelisks are a tall, four-sided pillar, tapering narrow on the top. It is a type of pillar like the pyramid, obelisks. So, during the time of the pharaohs, they built sun temples, pyramids of tombs for the royal monarchy, dead people, and the obelisks were built in honor of for the god Ra, the sun god. These were the ancient religious situation or the religious important period in ancient Egypt. These are the religious continuity throughout all these periods in ancient Egypt. And in the next episode, we can talk about the ancient Egyptian philosophies. Egyptian philosophies has not great significance. However, it is very important to talk it about because it influenced several other Semitic religions in the future. We can talk it about in the next episode. Now let me stop this episode.